We were treating AML with 7 and 3 in 1977. We are still doing that in 2019. Looking ahead 10 years from now, what is the best way forward to change this by 2029?
So I think one of the biggest advances that we've had in leukemia is the understanding that AML is not a monolithic disease, and there are a lot of different genetic subtypes, and we have to treat the genetic subtypes. I think we're at the very infancy of developing treatments that address that. And I think to some extent we've been held back by the fact that 7+3 works a little bit and does have a fairly high rate of remission, although a low rate of cure. And I think that slowed some of the advances. But I hope that as we get better understanding of the molecular heterogeneity, both between patients and within patients, that we'll have the ability to have better targeted therapy with less toxicity and better outcomes.
Excellent. Second question is, there are 3.5 million papers on cancer, 135,000 in 2017 alone. But there is a staggering disconnect between these wonderful, great scientific insights and translation into improved therapies. So what are we doing wrong?
Well, Azra, I think you're probably the only one who's read all 135,000 papers this year. and to some degree, that vast amount of knowledge, is a stumbling block because it's impossible to assimilate all of that. And, we're in some ways beholden to the editors and associate editors of major journals to decide what's an important discovery and what's not. And that's why I think it sometimes goes decades before something that was previously overlooked, comes to light and is really identified as being a seminal observation. And I don't know whether with more computerized analysis we might be able to potentially link some of the scientific findings and help that to identify better what might be important and what might be related to what. So that's one potential thing. And I think the other challenge that we have, and I don't have a good answer for this, is how to translate those changes to something that's therapeutic. I think that we do a much better job now of being able to use screening tests to look for things that inhibit enzymes, and I think we have a much better ability to do that now, but targeting transcription factors, splicing factors, other regulatory factors, especially cell membrane associated factors, is still a technological challenge. And I'm hoping that we'll get smart enough, and some of the advances we've been able to develop for enzyme targeted therapy will be able to be applied to those other areas of cell machinery, but I'm not immediately optimistic.
That's a very honest answer. Okay, my third question mark is that the fact that children respond to the same treatment better than adults seems to suggest that the cancer biology is different, but also that the host could be different. Since most cancers increase with age, even having good therapy may not matter as the host is decrepit.
Yes. Yes, with that very optimistic observation. Yeah, I agree with both parts of that statement. And I think that the biology of children's leukemia is different than adult leukemia. And while I think that it's reasonable to borrow from advances that we make in any successful line of therapy and try to apply them to adults, I don't think that we can count on that going forward. And as our aging population does become more decrepit, they are less able to tolerate toxic therapies. So if we want to have effective therapies, we need to have less toxicity. I think at the same time, though, we have to understand that there are limits to what can be expected, and it may not be reasonable for a 95-year-old to be able to expect to tolerate and have treatment for a disease as serious as acute leukemias. I can see that as being a goal, but we don't get to live forever.
Thank you. Question number 4. You have great knowledge and experience in the field. If you were given limitless resources to plan a cure for cancer, what would it be?
So I think I would start off with more information, and I think doing whole exome sequencing of every patient with leukemia, and then doing serial RNA-seqs for those patients to look at different clones and to follow them during the course of therapy would be where I might start. And I think one of the challenges that we've had in leukemia is that there always seems to be a clone that reemerges and defeats us. And knowing what that clone might be and how it gets there, whether it's because of the treatment that we've given, which does happen sometimes, is something that I think we really need to understand better before we can really envision curing the overwhelming majority of patients with leukemia.
So basically, application of the latest technology to more and more
I think so. I think we still are in a situation where we're only getting that information on a very small percentage of patients who have the disease. It's only at a few academic medical centers. Most patients aren't being analyzed in a sequential fashion. We're not looking at broad swaths of different ethnic groups. So I think we're still missing a lot of information. And I hope that as that technology becomes less expensive, that we'll be able to get more of that, and as we devise ways to analyze that information better, that will help too. But I'm not sure that we can really rationally plan therapy until we really know what we're up against.
So the final question is more of a philosophical one. Offering patients with advanced stage non-curable diseases like cancer palliative but toxic treatment is a service or disservice in the current landscape?
Yeah, so that's a very difficult question. I think that most patients would want treatment that they could tolerate if it results in improvement of quality of life, but may not want it if it doesn't. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a society is that what quality of life is varies between individuals. And there are some individuals who view any life as having quality. even if that's something that's not what they were previously accustomed to. And so it's hard to have a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. I think as a society in the United States, we almost certainly apply treatment to patients who would be better served addressing symptoms more specifically. But I think it's also hard on an individual basis to know who's going to benefit and who's not. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges in medicine.
Let me just ask one more question then. That a lot of patients ask me this at the end when we are having these discussions. So Doc, what would you do if it was you? Do they ask you, and what is your answer?
Yeah, they don't ask me that question quite so often. I usually try to frame that discussion in a way that makes my advice clear. Although I recognize that people do have different viewpoints on that, and it's surprising to me how many patients, given the prospect of life that doesn't have, or treatment that's not directed toward cure, that could have side effects, will elect to have that treatment. And I don't know whether it's just New York, but I'm more often surprised by patients who say, I've lived long enough, I've had a good life, and want to be kept comfortable. And I think that's been the exception more than the rule.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was very thoughtful answers.
Very difficult questions.